We called it a giant leap. We called it the dawn of a new era. We lit up our screens and held our breath. And when the rocket cleared the tower, we exhaled and said, "Look what we did, but look closer." Past the fire and the crowds and the flags and the mission patches. Look at where that rocket was actually going. Look at what sits at the end of 400,000 kilometers of absolute nothing. The moon is not a destination. It is a warning, and we just sent 4 people straight toward it. In December 1972, the last humans to visit the moon lifted off from the lunar surface and came home. And the moon, visible every night, hanging above every city and ocean and quiet backyard on Earth, waited. For 54 years, it waited. The technology to go back never vanished. The knowledge never faded. But the ambition did. Decade after decade, the most capable space program in history went no further than low Earth orbit, circling the planet 250 miles up, never escaping the thin ribbon of sky just above the surface. What ended that silence was not a single decision or a single moment. It was years of engineering, years of testing, years of building something the world had not had before, a rocket capable of carrying human beings back into deep space, a spacecraft capable of keeping them alive once they got there. On April 1st, 2026, both of those things flew together for the first time, and the silence ended. The Space Launch System is, right now, the most powerful rocket on Earth. 8.8 million pounds of thrust at ignition, more than any rocket currently flying on this planet. More even than the Saturn V that carried the Apollo missions half a century ago, a machine that had stood for decades as the absolute ceiling of what rocket engineering could achieve. The ceiling was raised. Atop it, the Orion spacecraft, a vehicle designed not for a single sprint and return, but for the long, brutal, radiation-soaked reality of deep space. More than twice the habitable volume of the Apollo capsule. A life support system built for weeks beyond Earth's protective magnetosphere. A European-built service module, making it the first truly international deep space crewed vehicle in history. This was not a replica of something old. This was something new, built for missions that will grow longer, go further, and return more than any mission that has come before. For the entire history of human deep space travel, every mission that ever left Earth orbit, the crew had looked the same. Every single person who traveled beyond the planet's gravitational neighborhood was a white American man. 58 years, every mission without exception. The crew of Artemis II did not look like that. For the first time in the history of spaceflight, a woman traveled beyond low Earth orbit, crossing a boundary that had existed unmarked and unchallenged since the space age began. For the first time, a person of color entered deep space, territory that had been, for nearly 6 decades, exclusively the domain of one kind of human being. For the first time, a non-American citizen left Earth's gravitational neighborhood, making Canada only the second nation in history to send a human being into deep space. And the record set in 1968, 3 human beings in deep space simultaneously fell without fanfare, simply because there were now 4 aboard a single spacecraft. These were not symbolic gestures. They were the straightforward consequence of choosing the best people for the mission. The result was that the definition of explorer, quietly fixed for 58 years, permanently changed. Deep space was no longer the domain of one country, one background, one kind of person. It belonged to humanity. Beyond Earth's atmosphere, beyond the protective magnetic field that shields life on the surface, the radiation environment of deep space is something different altogether. High-energy particles streaming from the sun, cosmic rays arriving from beyond the solar system. A constant bombardment that the International Space Station, sitting inside Earth's magnetosphere, never experiences. Orion was built to withstand it. This mission proved it could. At closest approach, the spacecraft passed within 4,067 miles of the lunar surface, close enough to photograph terrain with extraordinary resolution, close enough to document features that no crewed mission had ever seen at this proximity. Then the far side, as Orion swung around the lunar limb, the moon slid between the spacecraft and the sun, a solar eclipse, visible only from this precise position in space, impossible to witness from any point on Earth, unfolded in silence. The sun's corona glowed in a perfect ring of light around the dark disk of the moon. Ancient light, bending around a world with no atmosphere, witnessed by human eyes for the first time in history. Then the communications blackout. The lunar surface blocked every signal between the spacecraft and Earth. For 40 minutes, 4 human beings were completely beyond reach, swinging behind the moon at over 60,000 miles per hour in a silence so complete that nothing on Earth could penetrate it. When Orion emerged, it was intact. The mission continued. The farthest any human being had ever traveled from Earth, a record that had stood for 56 years, was 248,655 miles. Artemis II passed it and kept going, 252,760 miles from Earth, the absolute outer limit of human reach, further from home than any person born on this planet had ever been. 4,000 extra miles sounds like a small number against the scale of the solar system. It is microscopic. Against the scale of human history, it is everything. Every civilization that ever rose, every war ever fought, every discovery ever made, every human life ever lived. All of it happened within 248,655 miles of the place it started. On April 6, 2026, that boundary moved, not by accident, not in an emergency, by design, because this mission was built to push it. Re-entry at 35,000 feet per second, plasma wrapping the capsule. 6 minutes of silence as the spacecraft plunges through the upper atmosphere at a speed that turns the air itself into fire. Then parachutes. Then the Pacific Ocean, splashdown, April 10th, 2026. 9 days after leaving Earth, the mission returned intact, successful, having done everything it set out to do and broken records in the process. But this mission was never the destination. It was the proof. Proof that the rocket works. Proof that the spacecraft can protect a crew in deep space. Proof that the systems, the life support, the navigation, all of it can be trusted for what comes next. What comes next is the lunar South Pole, a region of the moon where water ice sits in permanently shadowed craters, where the temperature never rises above minus 250 degrees Fahrenheit, where the ground may hold the resources to sustain a long-term human presence, not a visit, a base, a permanent forward position on another world from which the rest of the solar system becomes reachable. For the first time in history, a woman and a person of color will walk on the surface of the moon, not as a milestone to be celebrated and then left behind, but as the beginning of a generation of explorers who do not look like the ones who came before. And beyond the moon, Mars, not as a distant fantasy, but as a program already underway that treats the moon not as a destination, but as a rehearsal. 54 years of silence ended on a Florida launch pad on April 1, 2026. What it began is still being written,